All right. So as I mentioned, the violence in Selma is outraging millions of Americans who are witnessing it on national television. You have a lot of white activists coming down into Alabama now to help the demonstrators. You have also the same people demanding federal action to support the civil rights movement, to support voting rights in the South for Black people. All right. King is going to come back from. He's gone to Atlanta for a few days. He comes immediately back to Selma when Bloody Sunday occurs. He's going to push to go forward with the march from Selma to Montgomery as planned on March 9th. Lyndon Baines Johnson asked him to delay. The federal judge who was going to overturn the Wallace order forbidding the march also asks him to delay. King is now stuck between those in his own movement who want him to push forward without regard for what the federal authorities say, and of course LBJ and this federal judge who want him to delay at the march. He decides ultimately that he's going to work with the federal government, so he'll wait until the order is overturned in a federal court. The order forbidding the march by Wallace is overturned in a federal court. All right. He does go across the bridge, the Edmund Pettus Bridge, on March 9th, just as a march across the bridge, not planning to go on to Montgomery, the capital. The police are there waiting for him. The idea was that he would turn around, they would go back to the church on March 9th. Okay. The police, however, part, and the road is open to Montgomery. The idea was that King would be humiliated and he would have to, on national television, turn around even when, like, the police seemed to be letting him go, even though, right, like, there's not any real guarantee of safety getting to Montgomery, probably, right? So, but anyway, King's like, okay, this is what we decided to do. This is what I told the federal authorities I would do, that I would not continue with the march on March 9th. So he goes back to the headquarters in Selma on March 9th. All right. He had with him about 1,500 people. Okay, a lot of them wanted to go forward with the march. All right. Now, Lyndon Baines Johnson, in the meantime, knows, well, so first of all, King is planning the march to go forward on March 21st, 1965. Okay, Lyndon Baines Johnson, in the meantime, knows that he has to take a stand because of Bloody Sunday. So he goes on national television. He makes a national address about civil rights, a very powerful speech, and King and others, I think, are moved to tears. Johnson is saying, look, this is not just, we have to defend the rights of Black people. It's not just up to Black people to defend their own rights. We all have to come together to do this. And it is our responsibility as Americans to do this. And the pro-civil rights people in the Congress stand up like 40-something times to cheer the speech. It's a good speech. Yeah, it's good. I mean, so, look, all right. So King, of course, resets the date for March 21st, 1965 for the march from Selma to Montgomery, where, again, they're going to go to the capital of Alabama, make petitions and speeches at the state capitol. That's the whole point of the march. All right. George Wallace, the segregationist, says he's not going to guarantee the safety of the marchers as they move from Selma to Montgomery. Okay, so Lyndon Baines Johnson calls Wallace up to Washington and says, "Look, you have to protect them." And I think it's it's like a 3-hour meeting or something like that. And Wallace comes out of the meeting saying not only that he's gonna cooperate with the federal government. Because basically, Lyndon Baines Johnson has said, if you don't do this, we're sending federal troops in to do it for you. That's it. Okay? And so Wallace leaves saying he will cooperate. And he says, really, he was very impressed by LBJ's speech, and much more impressed, he said, than he had ever been by JFK. And he says if he'd stayed much longer in the meeting, he wouldn't be a segregationist anymore. Okay? So LBJ's had a big effect on Wallace. Okay, so the march goes forward on March 21st, 1965. Now you've got a lot of white people from the North who are participating in the march. You've got federal troops and Alabama National Guardsmen, both of whom are protecting the marchers along the road, both sides of the road, all the way from Selma to Montgomery. You've got helicopters flying overhead. You've got Martin Luther King Jr. and John Lewis, who I guess has gotten out of the hospital at this point from what happened on Bloody Sunday, who are out there talking to demonstrators as they're marching. Okay, the march, a 4-day march. The evening of the last day of the march, they stop at the outskirts of Montgomery. They have a big rally there. They have these folk singers singing folk protest songs. They have a comedian, this guy, he's a Black comedian who is entertaining the crowd. Okay, so it's a big sort of rally to support the demonstrators. And then the next day, they have the final demonstrations on the state capitol of Alabama in Montgomery, where the king is speaking. You got 25,000 people gathered, and over the Alabama state capitol is the Confederate flag flying. Okay, but all these speeches supporting voting rights, supporting civil rights, on the steps of the state capitol of Alabama. It's a triumphant moment for the civil rights movement under the protection of Alabama National Guardsmen and federal troops that this rally can take place and go forward. All right, now it's that night there's another tragedy. A woman from Detroit, a white woman who was a housewife who had come down to be with the marchers and the demonstrators in Alabama. She was driving a black activist somewhere. And that night she's followed by 4 KKK men. They gun her down, they kill her. They didn't know the black activist was in the car. There was among these KKK members a FBI agent who was in disguise who said he fired into the air. But because he was there, right, they resolved the crime really quickly, the murder of this woman. Tragic thing. All right, following the march from Selma to Montgomery, the voting rights bill moves very quickly through Congress. The House of Representatives approves it. There's a bunch of there's some segregationist senators in the Senate who try to filibuster it again, but they majority of the senators force the bill to a vote, and the voting rights bill becomes a law in August of 1965. And what the Voting Rights Act did, it extended federal power in the South greatly. It allowed the Justice Department to intervene in counties where 50% or more of the population was not registered to vote, and to ensure that voting registration occurred fairly. And so this registration, this intervention of the federal government, the Justice Department in registration, would apply to local, state, and national elections. And it was effective because it made the percentage of the black population registered to vote rise from 30% to 46%. And the result of that was that extreme radical segregationists like Jim Clark are voted out of office in the coming years. So he is voted out of office in 1966 in a Democrat primary for the position of sheriff within that county there in which Selma is located. All right. Now, within the movement of the Civil Rights Movement, this Voting Rights Act of 1965 is a great triumphant moment, right? And there's a lot of people celebrating it. But there's also these deep divisions still within the Civil Rights Movement. It doesn't bring together the different wings of the movement. There's increasingly, going forward, a demand among some within the movement for more of a focus on the social and economic inequalities that black people suffer in relation to the white population, not just the guarantee of constitutional rights, but more than that, there's certain elements that need to be addressed in terms of society and economics that some within the movement say need to be addressed. Now, the division is very clear in August of 1965 because as some are celebrating the Voting Rights Act, there was within Los Angeles like several days of rioting in response. I believe the issue was police brutality. I haven't read up on that whole thing, but basically there's you'd think that in August 1965 everybody was just going to celebrate, but really there's what we see in August of 1965 is the extent to which the Civil Rights Movement is divided between those who want to celebrate this, but then those who want to go farther, and there's this rioting within a few days in Los Angeles, within a few days of the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, okay? And understandably there's discontent and so on and so forth, but the movement itself is split here now, but with Martin Luther King Jr. still kind of leading the nonviolent wing of it, again, grounded in those Judeo-Christian principles. All right, so tomorrow and for the rest of the week, we're going to be talking about Vietnam, all right? All right.